It's autumn time, baby, and that means two things. First of all, you can get pumpkin spice lattes in Starbucks. Yes, I did get mine. I got this, like, what was it, like an iced pumpkin spice. It had like some foam on it. I will say, even in this picture, it looks like Big Mac sauce, which is somewhat terrifying to think about, but it was actually delicious. But it's also the time that people try to read a little bit more because they've had their summer reads, they've been on holiday, they've had their fancy, they've picked up a book, they go, I think I could read a few more, therefore I have some books for you. But what is a autumnal book? Some people will say it's a book set in autumn. Boring! Some people will also say that it's dark academia. That's really boring! I would say that the autumn book differs from the summer book because we move into a slower pace. It is more reflective than the summer book. To say that summer is Marvel is to think that autumn is A24. And if you're a film student, you will find that joke exceptionally hilarious. The autumnal book could be short, but I think people will actually take a punt on something longer, something that will see them into the winter, especially if they don't read a lot themselves. And therefore, I'm going to start off with the challenge. The challenge for people to read, because I feel as though the autumn book also moves into the classics. And I think one of... it's not the best. It's not the best. I didn't say these were good recommendations. I'm just recommending book. But I think one of the best that people try to read is Dr. Zhivago by Boris Pasternak. It's actually Boris Pasternak, but we're not getting into that because the Americans, like, their brains will fall out of their head thinking that the O is an A. It's just one of those things we do, people. Dr. Zhivago is one of the greatest love stories of all time. Don't tell that to people who really like Lolita, because there'll be a fight in the comments. Don't you go doing that. This is, it's also Russian, isn't it? That's a fight in the comments if I've ever heard one. But this is the greatest love story that has a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of coincidence within Dr. Zhivago. Like, think how big Russia is. And the two people, like, they just keep happening to bump into each other. Really? Don't get too much into it because they're in love, and love conquers all, even geography sometimes. I'm not doing a great job with that one. We'll move on. My intake of true crime skyrockets as we move into the colder months. And indeed, apparently, Netflix's algorithm seems to, like, there's a thing, isn't there? And one of, it's a great book. But again, it's a classic, but it's a bit of a doozy. It is Confessions of an English Opium Eater by... God, I picked up the wrong book. What an idiot of me. It's On Murder by Thomas de Quincy. How did I even know? Oh, right. On Murder is basically, it's a bit of a non-fiction. It's Thomas de Quincy. He was on a lot of drugs, so it's a little bit different, okay? But this focuses on the murderer, John Williams. It's a great British name. Like, you'd never find one of those, would you? Who, in the early 19th century... went out on a killing spree and killed 11 people. But actually, you know what? No. I'm going to go back on this. I'm going to back myself. Both of De Quincy's are really good. So this one, On Murder, is about murder. Confessions of a English Opium Eater is I would call the English equivalent to William S. Burroughs' Junkie or Naked Lunch. Quincy was fascinated with drug use and so documented his time taking opioids and writing down his dreams. What I will say is that De Quincy is a great storyteller. Again, these are the Oxford, so they have a little bit of notes. These are really small, they are slim, but they're good. They go through like an absolute breeze. If people ask me for like real digestible classics, I normally tend towards the romantics, but especially Thomas de Quincy, because he's a romantic in a different light because of his like journalistic ways. If you like, say, In Cold Blood, if you like The Beatniks, Bukowski, I'm going more for the Americans because I feel as though the Americans thought that they invented this within the 1950s, but they didn't. Thomas de Quincy, a great shout, but not a great a shout as this book. You know I'm opinionated. If you've been on this channel, you know that I'm opinionated. This is one of the best books ever. This is a romantic novel zhuzhed up a little bit. It is slightly experimental, so if you've never really jumped into anything experimental. I think Jeanette Winterson has a very slow way of easing you into this type of writing, which I think is good. But it is full of reflections and pondering about love, identity, gender, and sex. It is one of the finest novels. What I think makes this a great autumnal novel is that as the cold creeps in Britain, as you get to the end on that farm, you're going to feel that cold snap, people. Absolutely spectacular. And lastly, something that you probably don't know about me. When it comes to autumn, it is the only time, I swear down, it's the only time I can watch Star Trek. If you think I'm joking, 2 years ago I started watching the original series, watched it throughout autumn, loved it. Tried to get into the Next Generation. Nah, we were too close to spring. Didn't happen. Last year, watched all of TNG. Okay? This autumn. Guess what I'm doing this autumn? Because I tried. It was too close to spring. Deep Space Nine, boys. Star Trek, to me, is that perfect autumnal show. There's a lot of episodes so my brain can just switch off as I come on in. I know what's happening. We move into the episodic. It takes itself, like, somewhat seriously. It's a little bit camp. Deep Space Nine doesn't sound... I mean, we have Cardassians. They don't look like they're down for a good time. I'm going to recommend Revelation Space by Alistair Reynolds. Why? Because Alistair Reynolds is a Welsh author. I mean, this book is a little bit of a chonkster. I cannot lie. But it is a space opera that moves at such a pace. It is indulgent. It is rich. I think there's always a balance between hard and soft sci-fi. And I think Alistair Reynolds has a nice middle ground. This isn't like Flowers for Algernon, and it's also not the three-body problem. Like, we're not moving into, like, such different degrees where you're either like, is this sci-fi? And also like, wait, what do you mean? What do you mean? And I've really told you nothing about the plot. Because you know what I think a recommendation should do? It should just make you go, oh, that doesn't sound like a bad plan, does it, boys? Therefore, I've thrown the rest, so I'll throw that one. Those are my autumnal recommendations. Are they good recommendations? I don't know. You're going to have to read, find out, and then come back and tell me how rubbish they were. Bye!